Nearly 500 adults over 55 kept a record of everything they ate, and researchers weighed the protein in every meal. At breakfast, one person in 100 got enough to trigger muscle repair. One. Not 10. One. By dinner, half of them cleared the same bar without thinking about it. Same people, same day, same kitchen table. So something is happening between the morning and the evening, and it isn't just appetite. Years ago, you were probably handed a number. Your body can only use around 30 grams of protein at once, they said, and whatever you eat past that goes to waste. It sounded reasonable. It spread everywhere. And it was wrong, in a way that quietly talked you out of the very thing your muscles were waiting for. So let me give you the real number, and then show you exactly how to hit it tomorrow morning. Let me tell you what this video is not. I'm not here to sell you a tub of powder. I'm not going to tell you to eat like a bodybuilder, or that you need 6 meals a day, or anything else that doesn't fit the life you actually live. I'm a doctor, and what I want is for you to still be carrying your own groceries at 85. That's the whole agenda. Now, about that 30-gram number. It came from real research, and the people repeating it weren't lying to you. Studies looked at how much protein maximally switched on muscle building in one sitting, landed somewhere around that figure, and then the message got flattened in the retelling. Maximally stimulates became can only use. Can only use became the rest is wasted. And once it sounded like waste, people started doing something reasonable and completely backwards. They ate less. Think about who that hurt most. Not the 30-year-old. It was you, at exactly the age when your body started needing more protein than it ever had, being told there was a ceiling and no point pushing past it. So the advice sounded careful. It sounded scientific. And in practice, it gave an entire generation of older adults permission to undereat the one nutrient holding their strength together. Nobody corrected it, because correcting it takes about 4 minutes, and your appointment was 12 minutes long and had a blood pressure cuff in it. And before I hand you the number, do me one quick favor. Subscribe if you want more of these, the explanations your appointment never has room for. And tell me down in the comments how much protein you think you got at breakfast this morning. Don't look it up, just guess, and put your age beside it. I read every single one. Then stay with me to the end, because the third way I'll show you is good, the second is better, and number one works even on the mornings you wake up with no appetite at all, which after 60 is most mornings. But first, 30 seconds on why the number changed on you in the first place. If you watched my last video, you'll remember a phrase, anabolic resistance. Here's the short version again, because everything today rests on it. When you were 30, your muscles listened closely. A modest amount of protein came in, and they got to work. Somewhere after 60, that hearing starts to go. The same amount of protein arrives, knocks on the door, and your muscles don't answer. They're not broken. They're just harder to reach. And the only way to reach them is to knock louder. That's why the guidance for someone your age runs higher than the standard advice, not lower. Current recommendations for older adults land between 1 and 1.5 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight every day, spread across 3 or 4 meals. More than a younger person needs. Read that again if you've spent years being told to go easy on protein as you age, because it's the opposite. Now here's what actually happens in real kitchens. Researchers pooled 8 separate studies covering more than 800 older adults and looked at when the protein showed up during the day. In every single group, without exception, protein was lowest at breakfast, higher at lunch, highest at dinner. And in that study of nearly 500 people I mentioned, breakfast averaged 11 grams. 11. That's a slice of toast with a scrape of butter and a cup of coffee. It's what most mornings look like. We'll get to what the target actually is in a few minutes, but I'll tell you now, 11 isn't close. So the obvious question is, does it matter? If you get plenty of protein at dinner, doesn't it all even out? I wish that it did. But your muscles don't have a bank account. They have a thermostat. A bank account lets you skip a deposit on Monday and make it up on Friday. The total is all that counts. A thermostat doesn't work that way. It reads the room right now, and it either clicks on or it doesn't. Then it reads the room again later, fresh, with no memory of before. Your muscles do the same thing. Each meal is its own reading. If enough protein arrives, the switch clicks and repair begins. If not enough arrives, nothing happens, and that opportunity is simply gone. You can't hand your muscles a double portion at 7 in the evening and have it retroactively cover the toast you ate at 8 in the morning. Which means the 11-gram breakfast isn't a small shortfall. It's a reading your muscles never got, every single morning. Which brings us straight to the number you were told and why it isn't true. So let's deal with that 30-gram claim head on, because you'll still hear it everywhere. Start with the plainest fact. Your gut absorbs essentially all the protein you eat, not 30 grams of it. All of it. Absorption runs at close to 100% efficiency for most protein foods, whether you sit down to 20 grams or 80. Nothing gets turned away at the door and sent back. There's a study I want to tell you about, because it settled this. In 2023, researchers at Maastricht published work in Cell Reports Medicine where they gave people either 25 grams of protein or 100 grams, then tracked every gram with isotope labels for 12 full hours. If the old rule were true, the 100-gram group should have used about 30 and burned off the rest. That's not what happened. The 100-gram group built more muscle protein and kept building for longer. Their response was still climbing at the 12-hour mark when the researchers ran out of measuring time. And the amount burned off as fuel? Less than 15%. The authors concluded there was no apparent upper limit to the response at all. Now, I want to be straight with you about something, because I'd rather you trust me than be impressed by me. That study was done in healthy adults between 18 and 40, not 75-year-olds. So I'm not going to stand here and tell you it maps perfectly onto your body, because I don't know that, and neither does anyone else yet. What it does settle, for every age, is the absorption question. The idea that your intestines have a hard cutoff at 30 grams simply isn't how digestion works. Here's the mistake underneath the whole myth. It confused the size of the doorway with the size of the room. People took a finding about how much protein produces the strongest muscle-building signal in one sitting and turned it into a claim about how much your body can physically take in. Those are two completely different things. The doorway is wide. Everything gets through. So if your gut isn't the bottleneck and your body isn't throwing protein away, then the old advice to hold back at any single meal was never protecting you from anything. It was just quietly costing you. So if it's not a limit in your gut, where's the real limit? The real limit isn't in your gut at all. It's in the signal. Here's what actually happens when protein reaches your muscle. Your muscle isn't counting grams. It's watching for one particular amino acid called leucine. Leucine is the messenger. When enough of it shows up in your bloodstream at once, roughly 2.5 to 3 grams, it trips a switch inside the muscle cell and repair begins. Below that, the message doesn't get through. So the question was never how much can I absorb? The question is how much protein do I need on one plate to carry enough leucine to trip that switch? And now I can give you the number you came here for. For most people, the muscle-building response is maximized at somewhere around 0.4 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight in a single sitting. Let me turn that into food in pounds, because nobody thinks in kilograms. If you weigh about 155 pounds, that's roughly 30 grams of protein at that meal. If you're around 180, you're looking at closer to 35. Bigger than that, closer to 40. For almost everyone watching, the target sits between 30 and 40 grams per sitting, not per day. Per sitting, 3 times. Now here's the part that really stings, and I want you to sit with it for a second. Say you're doing everything right. You've heard older adults need about 1.2 grams per kilogram daily, and you're hitting it. You're eating 25 grams at breakfast, 25 at lunch, 25 at dinner. On paper, that looks disciplined. On paper, you're meeting your daily target, and you may still be underdosing every single meal. Because this is not a dimmer switch. That's the mistake almost everyone makes. We assume 20 grams gives you 2/3 of the benefit of 30, that a little protein buys a little repair proportionally. It doesn't work that way. It's a light switch. Either enough leucine arrives and the switch clicks and the room floods with light, or it doesn't and you're standing in the dark. 20 grams doesn't give you some muscle repair. It may give you none at all. Which means a person eating 3 careful 25-gram meals can go an entire day hitting their daily number and never once flipped the switch. 3 meals, 0 signals sent. That's the quiet trap, and it explains a great deal about why people do everything right and still get weaker. So the question becomes very simple. How do you get 30-something grams into a breakfast you don't feel like cooking? Here are the 3 easiest ways, starting with number 3. Number 3 is eggs, and I know that for some of you a small alarm just went off. Hold that thought, because we're going to deal with it directly. First, the arithmetic, because it's beautifully simple. 1 egg carries about 6 grams of protein. 3 eggs gets you to 18. Melt a slice of cheese into them and you're around 25. Add a scoop of cottage cheese on the side, or a glass of milk, and you're comfortably in the 30s. That's the switch, flipped, before you finished your coffee. No powders, no measuring, no special shopping. 3 eggs. Now, the alarm. For decades, eggs were treated as something close to a health hazard because they contain cholesterol, and we assumed the cholesterol you ate became the cholesterol in your blood. That assumption turned out to be far too simple. For most people, the cholesterol in food has a much smaller effect on blood cholesterol than we once believed, and dietary guidance has shifted considerably to reflect that. Eggs are not the villain they were made into. But I'm not going to give you a blanket promise, because you're not a statistic, you're a person. Some people are genuinely more sensitive to dietary cholesterol than others. If you've been given specific instructions about your lipids, or you have familial cholesterol issues, or you've had a cardiac event, that conversation belongs with your own doctor who has your blood work in front of them. Ask them directly. Most people will hear that eggs are fine. Some won't. Both answers are worth having. Let me tell you about Gene. Gene was 74, from Topeka, Kansas. Back in the 90s, his doctor told him to cut out eggs. Gene was not a man who argued with doctors. He stopped that week, and he never went back. And for the better part of 30 years, his breakfast was 2 slices of toast and coffee. Here's what nobody thought to tell him. When he removed the eggs, nobody replaced the protein. The advice was about cholesterol. It said nothing about what to put in the empty space. So for 3 decades, Gene's first meal of the day carried almost no protein at all. And by the time I met him, he couldn't get out of a low chair without pushing off the armrests, and he'd decided that was simply what 74 felt like. Gene took the engine out and kept the car. It still looked like breakfast. It sat on the same plate at the same table. It just wasn't doing the job anymore. So why is this only number 3? Because it's genuinely excellent, and it asks something of you. You have to stand at a stove, crack shells, use a pan, wash that pan. On a good morning, that's nothing. But mornings aren't all good, and a plan that only works on good mornings isn't much of a plan. But if standing at a stove first thing isn't happening, number 2 takes it down to a bowl and a spoon. Number 2 requires no stove, no pan, and no skill whatsoever. If you can open a refrigerator and hold a spoon, you can do this one. Here it is. A cup of plain Greek yogurt and a scoop of cottage cheese stirred into it. That's the whole thing. Depending on the brands, that lands most people somewhere in the low to mid-30s for protein. Switch flipped, standing at the counter in about 90 seconds. Now, one word in there is doing a lot of work, and if you watched my last video, you already know which one. Plain. Not strawberry. Not vanilla. Not the one that says light on the front. Remember, the flavored versions can carry close to 30 grams of sugar, which undoes half of what you're trying to accomplish. Buy it plain and you control what goes in. And I know exactly what plain Greek yogurt and cottage cheese sound like sitting in a bowl together. They sound like something served in a hospital. So make it taste like food. A handful of real berries, blueberries or raspberries, and a good shake of cinnamon. If you want texture, a few chopped walnuts or almonds. Now it's a breakfast you'd actually choose, and every one of those additions is working for you rather than against you. Let me tell you about Dolores. Dolores was 79, from Mobile, Alabama, and she told me flatly that she didn't have time for breakfast. Never had. She was up early, she had things to do, and sitting down to a meal at 7 in the morning was not part of who she was. So I asked her what she did have in the morning. Coffee, she said, and usually a piece of toast. She had time. She had time to boil a kettle, wait for it, toast bread, wait for that, butter it, and drink a cup of coffee standing at the counter. What she didn't have was a version of breakfast that felt worth stopping for. Nobody had ever handed her one that took less effort than the toast. I want you to think of this bowl as the spare tire. Nobody puts a spare tire in a magazine. It isn't impressive, and it isn't the one you'd choose to show anybody. But it's already in the car. It works every single time, and it will get you home on the worst possible day. That's this breakfast. It isn't glamorous. It has never once failed. So why is it number 2 rather than number 1? Because it still asks you to eat. There's a bowl, there's chewing, there's sitting with something on a spoon. For most people, most mornings, that's easy. But some mornings, it isn't. Some mornings, your stomach simply says no, and no amount of good intentions changes that. And I'd be a poor doctor if I pretended otherwise. And that leaves number 1, the one I promised works even when you wake up with no appetite at all. Number 1 is a glass. That's it. And before anyone decides that sounds like cheating, let me tell you why I put it above the other 2. There's something that happens as we age that nobody warns you about, and it isn't a disease. Your appetite fades. The hunger signals that used to get you out of bed and into the kitchen quiet down. Food stops being interesting first thing. This is normal, it's well documented, and it is the single biggest reason advice like just eat more protein fails for people your age. You can't force hunger. Telling a 78-year-old with no appetite to sit down to a plate of eggs is like telling someone with no thirst to drink a gallon of water. The instruction is fine. The body isn't cooperating. A glass gets around that entirely. Here's the build. 1 scoop of protein powder, whey if you tolerate dairy, blended with milk or a spoonful of plain Greek yogurt rather than water. The powder brings roughly 25 grams. The milk or yogurt carries another 8 to 10. You're at 35 without trying. 60 seconds, 1 blender or even just a shaker bottle, nothing to chew. And one more thing before you buy. Turn the tub around and check the added sugars, because some of these are really milkshakes wearing a protein label. If you'd rather avoid dairy, choose soy or pea protein, not rice. I'm specific about that because of the leucine we talked about earlier. Rice protein runs low enough in leucine that a normal serving may not trip the switch at all, so you'd be drinking the grams without sending the signal. Soy and pea carry enough to do the job. And I want to be clear that this isn't a compromise or a lesser option. Clinical guidance for older adults says it plainly. If breakfast is difficult, a protein shake counts as a meal, not a supplement squeezed in around real food. A meal. Let me tell you about Ray. Ray was 81, from Spokane, Washington. Sharp, independent, drove himself everywhere. And he was never hungry before 11 in the morning. Not once. Not for years. So he skipped breakfast, ate a light lunch because by then it was nearly 1, and had a proper dinner. On paper, he wasn't starving. But his grip had gone soft. Jar lids beat him, and he'd started asking his son to carry things. Ray didn't need more discipline. He needed a delivery method his body would accept at 7 in the morning. He started blending a glass, and he drank it standing at the sink. And 11 months later, he was opening his own jars again. That's the whole principle. Liquid gets through a door that solid food can't. When your appetite has closed that door, you don't stand there arguing with it. You find the opening that's still there and you use it. So let's put all 3 together into something you can actually run tomorrow. 3 steps, and the first one takes about 10 seconds with a pen. Work out your number. Take your weight in pounds and divide it by 2.2. That gives you kilograms. Now multiply that by 0.4. Whatever comes out is your protein target for a single meal in grams. A 160-pound person lands at about 30 grams. Write it on a card and stick it to the refrigerator door, because that number is yours, not a magazine's, not mine, yours. Second, pick one of the 3 ways and set it up tonight before you go to bed. If you chose eggs, move the carton to the front of the shelf where you'll see it. If you chose the bowl, make sure the plain Greek yogurt and the cottage cheese are actually in the house, and put a bowl and spoon on the counter now. If you chose the glass, set the shaker or blender out where the coffee maker is. That's exactly the difference between doing it and meaning to. Third, and please hear this one, do not chase perfection. If your breakfast has been 11 grams for the last 20 years and tomorrow it's 30, you have won. You don't need to overhaul lunch and dinner this week. You don't need to weigh anything or track anything or buy an app. One meal, one switch flipped every morning. That alone changes the arithmetic of your week. Now, the important caveat, and I want to be direct about it. If you have kidney disease or you've been told your kidney function is reduced, these targets are not yours. Protein needs are calculated differently when the kidneys are working at reduced capacity, and the number belongs to your doctor, not to me. Take what you heard today to your next appointment and ask. For everyone else, without kidney disease, protein at these levels is considered safe. And the risk that actually shows up in the research at your age isn't kidney harm. It's muscle loss. Because here's what all of this is really about. You didn't fail at this. I want that said out loud, because I know some of you have been sitting there doing quiet arithmetic on 30 years of breakfasts and feeling something like shame. Don't. You were handed a number, you were told it was the science, and you followed it faithfully. Following good instructions carefully is not a character flaw. The instructions were simply wrong, and nobody came back to tell you. Now you have the right one. And notice what's different about it. It isn't a rule from a magazine or a headline meant for everybody. You worked it out on your own body weight, on a card, on your own refrigerator. That number belongs to you. Here's what it buys. Not youth, I won't promise you that. It buys the lid that turns. The stairs you climb without thinking about them. The groceries you carry in yourself in one trip because you always have. Those things aren't luck and they aren't inherited. They're built quietly, one breakfast at a time. And you get another one tomorrow. And there's one more piece of this worth understanding before you go. One small thing before you go. If this handed you something nobody had told you before, hit that like button because it's genuinely how this reaches the next person still eating an 11-gram breakfast. Subscribe and turn the bell on so you don't miss what's coming. And send this to someone you love who has toast and coffee every morning because they've almost certainly never heard any of it either. Now, that last piece I mentioned. Next time I'll show you which protein sources actually cross that switch and which ones quietly fall short. Because here's what nobody tells you at the grocery store. Two foods can show the exact same number of grams on the label and do completely different things once they reach your muscle. One flips the switch, the other just passes through. I'll show you how to tell them apart. See you there.